Hello and welcome. I'm Shivalika.
And I'm Tabish.
Both of us are currently serving fellows with
Oh,
Atlas Corp,
from India.
Class 46, and we welcome you to the pilot podcast that we are for now calling.
Controversial opinions.
Before we begin, we want to thank everybody who participated and shared their thoughts with us. And we would also like to share a little bit of how we reached to this moment.
So I go back to one of our conversations, me and Shivalika, that we were having a few weeks ago, and uh, the trigger point was one of the most prestigious independent journalists put in his resignation after a hostile takeover by a capitalist from India, and how we were talking about how dialogue is important and how uh, media bias is a big thing and how maintaining that neutrality is very important. And of course, the importance of creating dialogue on important topics.
Exactly. A dialogue versus a debate. A safe space where people could come speak up what they usually can't speak up. For example, when we were talking all of the background story, we did not take any names because yes, there are no safe spaces for now to come up and talk about things that really, really matter, that can some challenge the status quo in its truest manner. So we decided we have this vibrant community of our Atlas Core fellows. Why not go a little bit beyond our bubble, like both of our bubble, and invite them to share their thoughts, their opinions, their convictions with us, and probably we can bring them out to light for everyone to listen with a little bit of nuggets from our own experiences and probably some wisdom.
Right. And the idea behind is the other perspective is equally important. And what it can do is try to present you with another perception which might or might not be helpful in the bigger picture. But just as a just as a difference in what you have been hearing in the past, what your experiences have been. Um, so that's the idea behind the podcast. We invited your opinions, what you think are controversial in nature, or some things which are socially unacceptable or politically incorrect, and the reasoning behind how and why you think the way that you do. And we got some brilliant responses. I have to say.
Oh yeah, it made us think, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest, me and Shivalika went down a spiral, and when we were brainstorming on which one to pick and which one to um, drop in the interest of time, it really sent us down a spiral of introspection and how we think and how our biases are working. So yeah.
There were some things that we resonated with, both of us resonated with. There were some things that we realized we were coming from our own experiences and contexts, as sometimes as a man and a woman, sometimes as a Hindu and a Muslim, sometimes just belonging to different regions within the same country. Sometimes also, I think we challenge quite a few definitions. There's some things that we still can't agree upon, and let's see how that pans out.
Okay, and with that, to start us off, I'm going to be reading out the first entry that we got. Cutting off ties with your abusers that happen to be your parents. In most Asian countries, relationship between parents and children somewhat looks like economic treaty being wrapped elegantly as devotion, love, and sacrifice. It's great if parents spend their time bonding with their children, showing them compassion and affection. What if the scenario shifts? That the parents are abusive, distant, and judgmental? Do children have to get away from their trauma and do what they're destined to do? And the person has wished to be anonymous. So, what do you think, Shivalika?
Well, I could very well relate to the emotion behind the post. Um, I have I have a similar story. I had to, or I decided to rather, move out of my home and create a distance between me and my parents so that I could love them better, I could accept them better, so that they could accept me better, and my aspirations, my lifestyle, and just the person that I wanted to become was different from what they had always thought that I should be becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And at times, that was stifling, to be honest. And I think three words that our center has used, you know, what if the parents are abusive, distant, judgmental. Sometimes parenting can also be borderline toxic.
Mm.
Growing up as a teenager, even as a young adult, I had severe body image issues because the kind of background that I come from, your skin color, your height, your intelligence, your marks, everything mattered so much that they would sometimes be dinner table discussions, and that leaves a mark on you. So just to get away from that narrative, and the first time I also discovered that I could do so much more than what I was always told to was when I went for my post-graduation, which was far away from my home. I pushed sort of my own boundaries, and then I decided that, oh, there's more to life than what I was told.
Right.
Not always easy. There were a lot of tears,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of anger, a lot of mess when I decided to move out for the first time. But over time, I've also realized that, yeah, we learned our way around it. I think at some point, my parents also witnessed my growth, how responsible I could be.
Mm-hmm.
They're so much more okay with me doing my thing right now. So sometimes, yes, you have to create that distance for your own self, and you have to put your own self first, even if it's your own family. And it's not to say that you love them any less. You still love them, they're your parents, but you got to do what you got to do for yourself.
Hmm.
I don't know how you feel about it, Davish.
Well, my perspective on it would be would be a male perspective, because I think that is a very key differentiating factor as well in Asian countries, especially in India. So being a male, I think we still have more scope than the other genders when it comes to dictating how to live life on your own terms. So, and that also depends. That is also a continuum. If you have an elder brother, if you have siblings, um, so what happened with me was my older brother was more inclined towards following what my parents were telling him, and I had that I had that wiggle room to decide for myself, learn from his mistakes, and decide for myself. So again, that was a privilege that I had, and I think what the person here is also trying to say is that often the relationships are viewed as transactional, that the parents see, the mother and the father see that uh, they're investing X amount of time or X amount of money or X amount of effort into their upbringing, the upbringing of the child, and they should, or they ought to get some benefits out of that. That can be monetary in nature, that can be egoistic in nature, that can be any other thing.
Yeah, there's a saying also in Hindi, budhape ka lati.
Mm, mm. And I think, but my question to you would be, just as a probe, that is, I think you would agree that this is a generational thing. How do we stop? Because from my perspective, I think it is. Their parents might have done the same, so that's why they have that angle towards their relationship, how they're viewing their relationship with their children. How do we break the cycle?
It's a very good question. I think I have a couple of thoughts on that. So I would say when I moved out of my house for the first time, I wasn't fully aware myself about what I was, intending to do. All I knew is something did not feel right, and I had to get out of that situation. And I was feeling restricted, and restricted is an understatement. So that was the first step. What followed was years of self-discovery and a lot of inner work on self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is key to stopping that generational cycle that has been happening. What was handed over to our parents from their parents and to their parents from their parents doesn't have to continue forever. And once you recognize that for yourself, that you want to be something bigger than what, the so-called heritage from your family is being given to you, you want to be more than that. And you actually take that first, second, and third, even baby steps towards making that your reality, like lived reality. I think that is where that shift can start to happen. I mean, I can say that at least from my own experience, that I have grown so much in my thoughts, even, and as a woman, I would say that Um, I have judged other women back then, back in graduation, for living life out loud, just because I was handed over a certain kind of conditioning. And for me to actually look at myself in the mirror about what I was doing, how I was judging the other people, and then give that up, forgive myself for that, seek forgiveness for that from other people, and move on. I know that I am going to impart different ethos and values to my daughters.
Mm.
And that's how maybe that shift can start to happen.
In my view, I'm going to be honest, I believe too many people, and that could be controversial in itself, but honestly, I think too many people have suffered when I think of my homosexual friends. So my suggestion to them would be, I won't care, be selfish, because it's about your life at the end of the day. So be selfish. You're gonna be, depending on your context, you're gonna be worse off or better off, but it's gonna be your decision. So
Yeah, consequences will be from your actions and not somebody else's. And that's important, right? I mean, I might make a mess out of my life, but then I made it. It wasn't because somebody else handed it over to me.
right.
Yeah, put yourself first. And with that, let's move on to our next opinion, which is United States is still a developing country despite excellent marketing telling us otherwise. The person explains, people are killing each other on the street. Candidates with non-majority votes become presidents. Criminals don't get punished as long as they have money. It is a mess in here. Is it a mess in here? That was 3 months long.
I would say so. And like we were talking about this, if you were to take United States out of this this opinion, I don't think there would be so many countries from the third world, so to speak, fitting into this category. People trying to crawl over each other, rigged elections, or faulty elections, or other countries messing into other people's businesses, the justice system not working. I think that those are some of the statements that are true for countries from the quote unquote third world. I would say it is. I would say it does make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If I did not read the title statement, if I read only the explanation, I would have thought it was maybe our home country or our neighbors or somewhere there.
Oh, that is. Oh, okay.
But yeah, so guess we're on the same boat. And a lot of questions also arise from this one statement. And what is developing? How have we arrived at the conclusion of what is developed and who's not developed?
Right, the definitions. How do we even define what a developing country is? Is it economics? Is it the strength of your passport? Is it the resources that you're sitting on? What is it?
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a deeper conversation actually. And even like speaking from experience, we are now a little more than 3 months old in the United States, and honestly, back home in New Delhi, I would worry about coming back home if I was getting like super late. Then I need to have that kind of a structure in place that was going to drop me. Safety concerns as a woman, but that's I think that's the most that I've been bothered about my safety back home versus here. Like I've missed a shooting just by 5 minutes. If I was on time and if I was there, I would have just been right there on the road. Which is scary, right? Which is really, really scary. And that makes me think that do I need to worry about many more things than what I was worrying about back home? And then, I mean, what safety looks might differ here as compared to my home country, but the concerns are there. There are problems, just different kinds of problems. And this is also a grave security concern. I don't know how it's not. Also, what about my mental health?
Right. So my 2 cents here would be, the problems that we were facing had a different context back in New Delhi.
Yeah.
Let's talk about women's safety. Taking a cab at night is considered a risky business
Mhm.
in normal circumstances back in Delhi. Here, it might be gun violence. The
Mhm.
fact that people are carrying, that they're allowed to carry guns.
Oh yeah, there was a news item. There was somebody shot inside an Uber in a part of the city.
Right, right. So the context might be different, but struggles still remain, right? So what is even a developing country? So I think that is one for uh, the the people who write dictionaries. Where they put on they add a new word each year, which they term like addition um to the I don't know, Merriam-Webster dictionary or the Oxford one.
Or maybe for us to redefine. I think. I mean, let's face it, we have a stake in the future. Our next generation has a stake in the future. How we look at the countries from the global south, especially how they are looked at by the global north. I think it's time someone pushed the envelope on that.
Maybe one cool or one contemporary definition would be how, if you are, let's say this is a hypothetical situation, if you can be considered a developing nation or a developed nation if other countries are dependent on you or are looking at you more than the rest of the world, right? So for example, US, we know we have US, we get news about the US more than we get news about Pakistan back in India.
Is it?
Let's say mainstream.
If you're talking about news, then the person here also says, despite excellent marketing telling us otherwise, I would say that if this kind of violence, for example, in the last few weeks, they was shooting every other day. If this kind of violence happens back in the capital of India, it makes the headlines all over. It's an international headline every time something like that would happen there. But continuous violence here is not an international headline.
Right, but I meant it more like, do people know who the president of the United States is? Right? I would say like majority of people in Delhi at least would know who the president of the United States is, but might not be the case if I were to ask them who is the prime minister of Pakistan.
Okay.
So that way might be,
popularity context.
Maybe if more people are looking at you, or
yeah, but I think that's what even our sender is trying to say, right? That then that's basically excellent marketing. That's basically polishing an international perception about who you are and how you are, and kind of glossing over it.
Right. So a lot of similarities.
Yeah, and also, I mean, looking up to can be in so many things, right? Is it only economic, or is it because you have better music than us? So, yeah, it's food for thought. But overall, I think, yeah, we tend to agree. It's a controversial opinion, and we controversially agree with it. Yeah,
Right.
in our limited experience.
Okay, now moving on to another thought, as hoping to be as politically incorrect as the previous one. Here goes. If you don't use your privilege to challenge existing systems of injustice and oppression in whatever way is available to you, you can very well consider yourself complicit in sustaining them. The person explains, the fact that systemic oppression doesn't affect you doesn't mean you're off the hook from fixing it. You're a member of society just like anyone else, and if you're only here to benefit from privileges that come with it, we'd be better off without you.
Those are some strong words.
It's like I paid somebody to write it for me.
Yes, you did. Maybe you did.
That's not me. And again, the person has chosen to be anonymous here. Really interesting, and I really resonate with it very strongly. To start off with an example, whenever there is a robbery in the neighborhood, I think it's a collective failure. Everybody is responsible. The person robbing, the person being robbed, the bystanders, the police, the politicians, the local legislator, the neighborhood watch, you name it. I think everybody is responsible for it. and the fact that it wasn't your house doesn't mean that you're not responsible for it. You are equally complicit in that. It's I strongly resonate with it. And I can name a few other examples as well, but want to hear from you. What do you think?
So, in principle, I agree with the thought. So, there is this quote by Swami Vivekananda that inspired me a lot, at least in my initial days in this sector, which says, "So long as the millions live in hunger and ignorance, I hold every person a traitor, who, having been educated at their expense, pays not the least heed to them." And that basically stuck with me for a very long time during my first 5 years of starting in the sector. And however, as I said, I agree with it in principle. And in the last few years, I've really questioned that how much of it can actually be a reality. Like how much is true indeed and not just in principle.
Mm.
It's a good thought to hold on to, but can I really expect from a common person who is just trying to get by, you know, earning for their family, their children's education, their future, their marriages, and whatnot, like all of those aspirations that somebody has for their family, they are fulfilling those, and on the top of it, can I expect them
Mm.
to really have, ethos of justice and a sense of justice as strong as we do, who have chosen to work in the sector by passion?
Mm.
Is it even fair to have that expectation on them?
Mm.
And that's a question that has nagged me now for a little while.
Mm.
What would your response be to it?
I strongly believe that you can't be part of the system to change the system. For me, it doesn't make sense. I don't think that works under normal circumstances. You have to get out of the system to affect it. Um, and this thought also trickles down to many other opinions that I have about reservation, about rights, and so on. Um, and I think the the argument that I've heard against my opinion on this is you can't let go of your privileges, right?
Mm-hmm.
My counter argument would be nobody's telling you to let go of your privileges.
Mm-hmm.
It's only that we're asking you to use them for the others that don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you an example. I come from a ghetto in South Delhi. Um, I know I'm privileged just because of the fact that I was born a male
Mm-hmm.
in a patriarchal system. I know I'm privileged that I had the chance to go to an English speaking school.
Mm-hmm.
Many of my neighbors, my friends when I was growing up, didn't get the chance to go to an English speaking school. They didn't have, and because of that, they didn't have good enough teachers who could talk to them, who could teach them. And I think you know um, now I can't say that English is a problem. I think the fact that there is limited access to it is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And my lifelong work should be to eradicate that, to alleviate that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so that would be another example that I would strongly, uh, that I could derive out of this opinion, this thought.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, I agree. So I think what you were saying is that it would start with a deeper awareness of where you are. I mean, not to use privilege as a slur, but to really be aware of your own standing in the society, of how society puts you at an advantage, and then working your way through it to basically make that advantage available to everyone.
Hmm.
That is something that I resonate with, but there's something that I would sort of hold you to, because people, when you say that people inside the system, there are enough people inside the system who are demanding change, and I have been one such person. I've worked with the government for at least a few years, and I would say that sometimes people who are outside the system who want change, and believe me, not everybody does. A lot of people outside the system also have their own islands of power that they hold on to. So outside the system, people who want change, and inside the system, people who want change, unless they find a way to find each other and sit on the same table
Hmm.
and exchange thoughts.
Mhm. How much people would say that I'm quoting some real extreme examples. How much of that conversation, of that dialogue, is going to be beneficial to a person like Bilkis Bano, who was gang raped in 2002?
For example, the policies that investigate are so weak when a woman is raped back home in India. Anyone, irrespective of gender, can misuse them. That's a policy issue. So a person who can, within the system, push the envelope has to basically, then the two have to come face to face. The people who are outside who want justice for them, there are people on the inside also who want justice. To say that there is nobody on the inside who wants justice is a little unfair.
No, I'm not saying that, but the even the lives that you directly affect by the time. So while you're trying to make a change for Bilkis Bano, let's say, there are each second that you try to change the system from within, the system is creating another Bilkis Bano. So that's a race against time.
No, I'm saying that both of them have to come together, because simply going outside the system also, that's half the battle. Half the battle is within. That's all I mean. That both of them have to come together on the same table. And I understand this is a very long discussion. Maybe, and also I think we're derailing from the topic.
Right, yeah. And for those who don't have any context, Bilkis Bano is one of the victims of the 2002 Gujarat riots. So if you're interested, you can look it up on Google and you can know more about the story.
And the next one is by our fellow Zunaira Ali. Diversity for the sake of diversity creates more exclusion than inclusion. Yeah, but before we comment, thank you, Zunaira, for being brave enough to let us identify
not be anonymous.
You. Let us. Thank you for letting us to identify you with the opinion. Zunaira has shared a lot of her thoughts about why she feels so strongly about this opinion, and she says, hear me out. I'm not going to be the female representative to offset gender ratio in your event panel and office. I appreciate the conscious effort of bringing diversity to workplaces, but diversity is not just people from different genders, ethnicity, culture, and color. Even if you cover all those bases, if you're not going to create an environment for them to thrive, don't bother. She also goes on to talk about how sometimes female members are just like token presence on teams. She's also talking about what about ASL training being not just for designated interpreters, but to the whole team, so that people can feel more comfortable in their setting. Equal or more maternal paternal leaves for all genders. And and then she says that the point is that if you're not ready to evolve your environment to cater to different people's needs, you're doing a shitty job at being inclusive. And that made me think quite a lot about, how sometimes both inclusion and exclusion sort of rise together when we make all of these criteria. But then, every time we're including somebody, we're also excluding somebody. What were your thoughts when you read about this for the first time?
I think I don't completely agree, in all honesty. I think, again, it could be controversial in my own way. Like, I feel that in order to bring about evolution or change in the system, there has to be some collateral damage. So, for example, in the independence struggle back in India, people were willing to die. They were okay with the fact that there were going to be collateral damage. The most famous martyr during that struggle, Shahid Bhagat Singh, was not afraid to be a collateral damage. He willingly, after bombing a parliament session, he willingly gave in to the authorities. He was happy to be hanged. He accepted that was his destiny in that bigger movement. So I think in order to bring about change, there has to be some collateral damage. Unfairly, of course, life is unfair.
Thank you for saying that. I was bubbling up.
and again, that is controversial. But going back to one of the things that Zunaira has mentioned in her reasoning is hiring policy, so to speak. I know skills or actual skills might get overlooked, but that is a risk that you should be willing to take um, to set in to fulfill a policy, for example, the hiring policy, which is which has some reservation for women or other gender. So if you don't have that policy, you won't have representation. If you don't have representation, you are missing on a particular perspective, and that is a downward spiral. You end up not catering to a specific group. And in that whole spiral, there tend to be some collateral damage. The first few hirings might not be actual representation, but to have a policy which favors women or favors other gender might be a start to alleviate a generational thing.
So when you put it like that, I feel that I also agree with you. For example, back home, we have reservations for women to become gram panch, sarpanchas, right?
Right.
And I had this conversation with my mentor once that I'm a city girl, right? So for the first time, like some 9 years back, I go to a village and I realized that the sarpanch is supposed to be a woman, but it's actually her husband who's handling everything, and
Who's
that's
calling
the
the shots.
norm. Yeah, and that's a norm. Panchayat pati is actually an unofficial designation in the system, right? So I was really sentimental about it, and my boss, my mentor, he says that, Shalika, look at it this way. Maybe this generation, but what about her daughter? She knows now she has an aspiration, and it's going to become a generational change. So I agree when you say it's a generational change, and yet not to. It's really unfair. Like theoretically, I agree with you. At the same time, like every pore of my body is sort of revolting against it, because I've also been in settings. I work with the government. Like those were the power corridors, and this very high level meeting is happening. People are there from different organizations, like other governmental bodies. We are deciding on some, innovations that we want to include in a conference. And the chair of the meeting was a very senior person. In the room, there were only 2 women. I think there were about 12 or 14 people, and only about 2 women. One was me, who was a very, very junior colleague in the system, and another very senior person from a different governmental body, whose life work is reflected in so many things around allied agribusinesses. And there's a whole discussion whether we should be including milk chilling plants in those innovations or not, decentralized milk chilling plants, which is primarily a woman's responsibility in a familial unit. And the moment this lady says something, and they were going to scrap that milk chilling plants, like that was the consensus, and she says that, I'd like to say something. And the chair of the meeting goes, oh yes, let's hear the gender perspective out. Honestly, all of us, at least both of us, I don't know how the men felt about it, but both of us were visibly shaken by the comment. And I was like, just the moment a woman opens her mouth, it becomes about gender. What was your perspective? Was that not gender? Don't you have a gender? Right. And like the whole merit of her points was watered down by that one statement. Nothing else that she said mattered, because it was already colored by the word, the term, gender perspective. So why even invite then, if you really don't want to listen to it? And I still feel what she said made sense. Of course, that innovation was not included. I mean, she was just heard for the sake of being heard. And that's really sad, right? Maybe future generations will see it, but for now, it's a hurtful situation. And I'm again getting sentimental about it.
Right. We all get charged up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the crux, the only thing that differentiates a democracy as the highest form of governance in current situation is representation. If you were to ask me what is a democracy, I would say it's representation. And if there are, and of course, it's a fight within a democratic system. Not just for the fact that you term or you label yourself a democratic country, it doesn't make you so.
Yeah.
So there has to be some struggle or some revolution that needs to be a battle that needs to be fought and people are going to be suffering, right? People do suffer. That's what a war is. That's what a battle is. And yeah, so I think we're not there. Of course, we're not there. But if you have like sound policies, if you fight for sound policies, even if you don't get it the first few times,
Mm-hmm.
I think the bigger picture would be uh, much better.
Yeah, and I think that also brings us to another question
Mm.
that I don't think we need to answer right now, but it's a question that
Right. Go ahead.
representation might be the first step, like setting that policy might be the first step.
Mm-hmm.
But what more do we need to
Right,
do?
right.
What kind of sensitization exercises do we need to do? What kind of conversations do we need to do, especially with the senior most colleagues? For example, in the case that I narrated, that's a really, really senior colleague. And if he is so insensitive about it, what do I really expect from the rest of the organization, right? So how do you engage, especially these people who are in the positions of influence, so to say, and cause that shift to happen?
Right. And I think again, it's interesting that you brought that up, because it's a scale that we operate on, right? So it's not just about representation that has to be reinforced with, like you say, sensitization, or that has to be scaffolded by other policies or other branches of or other pillars of democracy. Of course, it has.
And sometimes, I mean, this is something that I forgot to mention. Sometimes, when you come in because the organization has some kind of representation, there's already judgment on you. You got to deal with that also. I mean, you might be extremely talented, but then people around you might just feel that, oh, you were hired because of the quota or something like that, and not because you really stood out. And that's a very, very challenging landscape to then navigate. So I think it's time that at least maybe we as a generation sort of moved to a different conversation than just numbers and the qualitative aspects of how it affects the person in question and also the peers.
So those were some hard-hitting submissions that me and Shivalika both resonated with. And then there were few submissions that we felt, which were great, but we felt that if we took them to talk about, we wouldn't have done justice, simply because we don't have much context about what is being said.
Like, we had more questions than thoughts or answers or opinions about them. We would like to share them with you, though, at least two of them which really stood out, and in fact which basically piqued our curiosity.
So one of them was, being Jewish is not the same as being white. Again, in a few words, it unpacks a lot of dynamics.
It's triggering.
Yeah, I agree. And because, of course, I'm not Jewish, and so is not Shivalika, and we're not white, definitely. We thought, maybe it would be best for the person who sent us this. It would be best if we could have them on.
Yeah, and we would like to invite them to have a conversation with us. There was another one. It said, meritocracy is a myth. Which basically, this statement evokes so many emotions. And if I could just read out a little bit on it, meritocracy is widely sold to make people believe that hard work and determination will earn them a better life, thus making them focus on that rather than abolishing existing systems based on operation and exploitation. And that is that makes me question what merit is or what privilege is.
Right. And again, very contextual. And we felt like we could agree with some of the thoughts that initially came in our mind, but then there were things that needed more context, which again is very is very individualized.
Subjective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very subjective. Exactly. So what we thought as a continuation of this podcast that it could be was having this person who sent us this come on, and we could ask them questions, and then again spend a more in-depth uh, time with them on this conversation, because of course this needs more understanding for us to
Yeah.
comment on.
Yeah. It's beyond us, let's just be honest.
Mm.
It's beyond us, and hence, only if you would like, we
Right.
would love to have you here with us.
Of course, we know that person, but you don't, and we're gonna keep it that way unless the person wants to come on. Right.
Yeah. So that brings us to an end of our pilot.
Yeah, exciting. It was exciting to read through all the opinions and thoughts that we received. Of course, felt like some kind of validation. It was really worthwhile being in your shoes, trying to think from a different perspective, trying to find how we feel ourselves. Um, where will we go with this next? We don't know. We are open to suggestions, your feedback. I hope we get them too. Your thoughts, Shivalika?
Yeah, I think we thoroughly enjoyed the process. Thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And we are still thinking about how to amplify your voices, and we would love to do it again. So let us know what your thoughts are. Thank you for listening.
Until next time.
Thank you. Goodbye.